Most people sleep through the night. These 15 didn't. From hospitals to graveyards, radio booths to bus routes, each night shift turned into a waking nightmare. They saw things, heard things, and some of them never came back. These are 15 true night shift horror stories. Let's begin. You ever sit in a building at 3:17 a.m. and realize you're the only one alive who's breathing? That's how it felt. Except, I wasn't alone. My name is Daniel, and this happened when I was 27 years old, working the graveyard shift at a hospice center in northern Oregon called Bright Pine Care and Convalescence. The place was nestled just off a state highway, surrounded by dense forest. Quiet, almost peaceful if you didn't think about what went on inside. I was a tech, a glorified night attendant. My job was to do rounds, log vitals, and help the on-call nurse if anything came up. The building itself was simple. A U-shaped wing with 12 rooms, a central nurse's station, and a staff kitchen in the back. On most nights, there were no emergencies, just stillness, fluorescent lighting, and the ticking of clocks. But in the week leading up to the February full moon, something changed. That was the week when time stopped moving at 2:41 a.m. It was a Wednesday morning, just past 2:40 a.m., and I was pouring coffee in the break room. I looked up at the wall clock. 2:41. A few minutes later, I glanced again. Still 2:41. I checked my phone. 2:41. Then the wall-mounted iPad we used to log medical notes. 2:41. I walked into the hallway. The motion lights flicked on. I passed room 4, where Mr. Koenig, a retired math teacher, was snoring softly. I checked the analog clock above his door. 2:41. Now I was uneasy. I did a slow loop through the building. Every device that displayed time, digital or manual, read 2:41. Then, from the far end of the west hallway, the unoccupied wing, I heard it. Top, top, top. The sound of a cane on tile. Slow. Deliberate. There wasn't supposed to be anyone in that hall. The west wing had been out of use since a plumbing incident the previous fall. No staff went there. No patients were assigned. The hallway lights had been disconnected. I grabbed the flashlight and the baton we kept under the nurse's station just in case. "Hello," I called out quietly. No answer. I crept toward the western corridor. The overhead lights remained off. I switched on the flashlight and swept the beam down the long, sterile hallway. It was empty. The tapping had stopped. Then I noticed room 24, the last room on the right, was open just a few inches. I pushed it open fully. Inside was nothing but an old hospital bed and yellowed walls. But someone had drawn something on the far wall. A jagged black circle with an eye in the center, vertical slit for a pupil like a goat's eye. I turned around. Top, top, top? Right behind me. But the hallway was empty. I ran back to the nurse's station. Checked my phone. 2:42. Time had finally moved. I didn't sleep after that shift. The next night, before rounds, I casually mentioned room 24 to Clara, the day nurse. "Room 24?" she asked, visibly uncomfortable. That was Henry Glass's room. I blinked. He a patient? Was. 6 months ago. She pulled his file from the archive. A thin folder. Only 2 pages and an intake photo. An elderly man in a red cardigan with a gaunt expression. "He screamed most nights," she said. "Said something was watching him from the vents. Died in his sleep. Autopsy said heart failure." She leaned in. "That room's been off ever since." Friday morning, around 3:03 a.m., I was reviewing the vitals dashboard when I noticed a flicker on one of the CCTV feeds. Camera 3, covering the western corridor. I watched as the grainy feed fuzzed with static. Then, for just 1 second, it showed a figure, tall, leaning, pale, using a cane. Eyes staring straight into the camera. Then gone. The footage reverted to normal. I rewound it, played it again. No figure. But the timestamp read 2:41 a.m., even though it was now after 3 o'clock. Then the nurse station printer came alive, spitting out a blank vitals report. Except at the bottom, in faint ink, someone had written, "He still walks. Saturday night. Final shift before my weekend off." When I walked in, I immediately saw something new. Room 24 now had a nameplate.
Elweston.
What? The wing was still marked closed. I knocked. No answer. I pushed the door open. The bed was made. Chair positioned facing the window. No one inside. But on the tray table sat a steaming cup of coffee. Still hot. I stepped back. Then, from down the hallway,
Top, top, top.
again. Always at 2:41. I made my final rounds. The patients were uneasy. Mr. Koenig was muttering numbers in his sleep. 241. 2. I heard scratching from inside room 24 but didn't go in. Back at the nurse's station, I sat down. Took a deep breath. Then every screen, CCTV, vitals, wall clock, blinked once. And froze.
2:41 nachts.
I turned. A man stood in the hallway. Thin. Red cardigan. Eyes pale and cracked like porcelain. He walked past the station. Slow. Leaning on a cane. He whispered, "You see it now," and vanished. I quit the next morning. 2 months later, Bright Pine closed down. Code violations. The building was left to rot. I found an old listing photo of room 24 online. The bed, the window, and in the reflection of the glass, a tall man staring back. If you zoom in close, you can just barely see the clock behind him. I used to believe that silence meant safety. Now, every quiet moment sounds like a scream I haven't heard yet. My name is Alexis Cole. I worked as a night shift dispatcher in a rural part of Tennessee, deep in the Appalachians, where cell coverage dies, and the only way to summon help is through an old landline or a direct call to the county radio tower. We handled everything from 911 calls to wildlife alerts, missing persons, forest fires. Most nights, we'd go hours without a single ring. It was peaceful until winter last year. I'd been on the job 5 years. Steady, calm, methodical. I thought I'd heard it all. Then the line started ringing, with no one on the other end. It was December 12th, middle of a snowstorm, and I was alone on shift. My partner was out sick. I had the monitors, the wall map, and a thermos of lukewarm cocoa to keep me company. Then the red line blinked, a direct county emergency signal. That line was reserved for landline-based rural alerts, like emergency call boxes or old dial phones wired into abandoned cabins. I picked up. 911 dispatch, this is Cole speaking. What's your emergency? Nothing. Just static. But not normal static. This had a pulse to it like a heartbeat through the line. I repeated myself. Still no voice. Just the sound of something breathing. It was faint.
Wet.
Gurgling. Then, right before I hung up, I heard it. Don't leave me here. A whisper. Not male. Not female. Just gray sounding, if that makes sense. I hung up. Seconds later, it rang again. Same line. Same number. Caller ID flashed. Cabin 6, Blue Ridge Sector. I pulled up the physical dispatch ledger. Blue Ridge Sector was once part of a ranger network, back in the 70s. But after 2 fires and an avalanche rerouting, it had been listed as non-operational for the last 12 years. Cabin 6 was last registered to a Firewatch officer named Rachel Keys, presumed missing in 2009 during a blizzard. I checked the maps. No road access anymore. The radio tower near it was decommissioned. There was no power, no phone connection, no way that cabin could be calling me. So who or what was dialing in? I logged the incident and wrote it off as a crosswire glitch. But the calls didn't stop. Over the next 4 nights, always around 2:15 to 2:20 a.m., the line would ring. Each time, it would last exactly 27 seconds. Each time, I'd hear whispers, gasping, like someone on the verge of drowning. One night, I recorded it and ran it through a spectrum analyzer. What I saw didn't make sense. Hidden under the audio peaks were numbers, sequences that didn't fit natural waveforms, binary codes. I had a friend who did amateur radio decoding. I sent it to her. She called me at 3:30 a.m., freaking out. "You didn't tell me this was a distress call," she said. "What?" "It's a looped SOS, but the pattern is off. There's an overlay, like someone's piggybacking on the code." "What does it say?" She paused. "They buried me here. Not all of me." My voice got out. 3 nights later, I got to the station early. Snow was hammering the windows, visibility was nearly zero. Around 1:50 a.m., I started hearing weird interference in the headsets. The monitors flickered. The lights dimmed. Then the phone rang early.
1:58 Uhr nachts.
Red line. I picked up. Static. Then a whisper. "You're close now. Listen for the bones." I dropped the receiver. Heart pounding. Then behind me, a door creaked open. There was only one other door. The server room. I slowly turned. No one there. But cold air rushed out like a freezer had been left open. Inside the server room, the dispatch logs were being printed automatically, page after page. But every page said the same thing. Buried under 6. Watch for the third tree. The next morning, I filed a system interference anomaly report and tried to forget about it. But something gnawed at me. Cabin 6. Buried under watch for the tree? That night, I brought in an old forestry map and circled Blue Ridge sector. There was an old access trail, mostly covered now, but with a small footbridge near a gully. On a whim, or maybe out of fear, I decided to go there. Yeah, I know. Stupid. But it felt like I was already part of something. Like that voice wouldn't stop until I followed it. So on Sunday, 1 p.m., I drove my Jeep out past the gravel trail, parked, and hiked 2 miles through knee-high snow to the spot where Cabin 6 was supposed to be. And there it was, standing, somehow still intact, despite the record saying it had burned down. The wood was dark, soaked from snow, windows caked in frost, the door slightly open. I stepped inside, smelled mold, rot, and somehow smoke. On the far wall was an old emergency phone, the kind you crank to power. It was off the hook, and next to it, carved deep into the wood, "My voice still works." I turned. There was a cot. On it, bones. Old, picked clean. But in the corner was a dispatch jacket with the name tag.
R. Kies.
I left the cabin shaking. Called it in anonymously. Rangers retrieved the remains. Said it looked like someone had sheltered there and froze to death years ago. But when they checked the phone,
No wires.
it had never been connected. And yet I kept getting the calls. Every week. Same time. Until I answered with her name. Rachel. The voice paused. Then whispered, "Thank you." That was the last time it ever rang. To this day I still work dispatch. But I keep a printed copy of that call log on my desk. The one that says buried under 6. Watch for the third tree. Sometimes, when a call comes in late at night and the line goes quiet, I hear a faint click, like someone's listening. I just hope it's her, because if it's not, then someone else figured out how to reach through the wires. Hospitals are full of ghosts, some still alive, some waiting to die. But what I saw in the sub-basement wasn't either. I'm Olivia Park, a registered nurse who worked night shifts at St. Lillian's Medical Center in southern Massachusetts for nearly 7 years. You'd think I'd have gotten used to the rhythm of it. Patients in and out, endless charting, the subtle decay of fluorescent lights and antiseptic air. But you don't really know fear until you hear something dragging itself down a hallway that should be empty, with no feet to do the dragging. This happened in 2021, just before they shut down the East Tower permanently. But I still have my old security badge. And the nightmares. St. Lilian's was built in the late 1800s and retrofitted a dozen times. Most of us worked in the West Tower, modern, clean, electronic charting, everything digital. But the East Tower? That was where they kept overflow during flu season or the occasional psych hold. It was 5 stories tall, built from red brick, with Gothic window arches and a faint iron tang to the air, like rust and wet pennies. The bottom 2 floors were mostly unused, especially the sub-basement, which was said to have once housed a long-defunct morgue and overflow pathology rooms. Only maintenance had access, or so we thought. It was early February, the dead of night. I was halfway through a double shift in post-op when the overhead speaker blared. Code blue. East Tower. Room B03. We all froze. There was no B03. That floor was sealed. The charge nurse blinked at me. Was that a joke? But the code had come through the actual hospital alert system. Authorized access only. Someone had triggered it. Security confirmed no one was scheduled on that floor. They radioed me to escort maintenance to verify the alarm. I didn't want to go, but I volunteered anyway. Dumb habit from nursing school. Me and a guy named Ronnie from facilities took the old elevator. One that groaned like a throat being cleared after decades of silence. We hit the sub-basement button. The light flickered, then went out. But the elevator still moved. Ronnie muttered, "This thing's got a mind of its own." When the doors opened, the air smelled wrong. Like bleach, rot, and moldy laundry. We stepped out into pitch black. Flashlights on. We passed a row of steel doors with faded labels. Specimen storage, autopsy theater A, body prep. Then we found room B03. The door was ajar. Inside was a hospital bed. Old, mechanical, rusted, and someone was lying on it under a sheet. Ronnie whispered, "Nope." I stepped in. The sheet shifted. Not from a breeze. From breath. Something underneath it was breathing. I pulled back the sheet. It looked human. Sort of pale. Bloated. Mouth slightly agape. Skin mottled purple and gray. But it was breathing slow and raspy. The lips were dry, cracked open. Its eyes were closed, but the eyelids fluttered like dreaming. I stepped back. Ronnie turned to run. And then its hand moved. It grabbed my wrist with shocking force and whispered, "We are still waiting." Its eyes opened, milky white, with pupils like oil on water. I screamed. The lights went out. When I came to, Ronnie was gone. Security found me 20 minutes later, hysterical in the hallway. I told them everything. They found Ronnie's flashlight and tool bag, just sitting in the elevator. He was never found. The hospital filed a misplacement of personnel report, blamed faulty wiring and stress. They told me I probably hallucinated everything due to exhaustion. But when I asked to see the elevator cam footage, the security tech looked at me strange. "There's no footage," he said. "We had a loop glitch. But the motion sensor logs show something odd." "What?" "Elevator descended to sub-basement, then went down again. There's nothing below the sub-basement." He looked at me. "That's what I thought." I went on leave for a month. When I returned, they'd locked off the East Tower with metal gates. Everyone was told to stay out. But every night around 3 a.m., my workstation phone would ring once. Just once. No number.
No tone.
One night I answered, just out of instinct. I heard the hospital's code blue alert tone, followed by a whisper. "Still waiting. Bring more." I slammed the phone down. But the next morning, there was a note in my locker.
No handwriting.
Just typed, matrix style. "You brought us one. We remember." A week later, I was doing rounds. ICU was quiet. Then the fire alarm tripped, but only in the east wing. I rushed toward the panel. It read, Room B03, sprinkler fault.
Impossible.
There were no sprinklers in that part of the building. I saw it then on the camera feed. The metal gate to the east wing was wide open. I walked over, heart pounding. My badge buzzed even though I never swiped. Lights flickered. At the end of the hallway, a figure stepped into view, wearing a nurse's uniform, holding a clipboard, skin pale and sagging, eyes blank. She pointed toward me, then raised one finger to her lips. HHHH. That was my last shift. I never went back. 3 months later, St. Lillian's shut down half its facility due to structural instability. I was never interviewed. Neither was anyone else from night shift. But in my new apartment, I sometimes still hear a single ring on my landline at 3 a.m. No caller ID, just breathing. Last week I answered it. The voice whispered, "We moved, but you still owe us." They told me the cameras were broken, but every night I watched someone walking around the locked service level who looked exactly like me. My name is Malik Vega. I worked as an overnight security guard at Whitmore Galleria, a now-defunct shopping mall on the outskirts of Detroit, the kind of place that used to buzz with life in the 90s, but by 2022 had become a rotting corpse of hollowed-out anchor stores, shuttered food courts, and mannequins frozen in time. At night, it felt like walking through a tomb that still had breath. My job was simple. Patrol the floors, check the fire doors, make sure no squatters were sneaking in. Just me, a flashlight, and a handheld radio that barely worked in the underground levels. That was before I found Sublevel 3. The first weird thing happened my 3rd week on the job. I was doing my rounds, upper floors, parking deck, stairwells, when I noticed something odd near the old Dillard's freight elevator. The light above the elevator was flickering. I'd never seen it on before. It was supposed to be cut off, no power below Sublevel 2. Out of curiosity, I tried the elevator call button. To my surprise, the doors opened. Inside, the panel had one more floor than I remembered. B3, Sublevel 3. I hesitated, then pressed it. The elevator groaned but descended. When it stopped, the lights buzzed on. Dingy. Yellow. It looked like a long corridor of empty loading docks, old mannequins half-wrapped in plastic, and a maintenance station with mold on the walls. But what got me? The sound. A phone ringing. Somewhere deep in the dark. I walked slowly past the unused service hallway. The sound grew louder. Not a modern ringtone, one of those ancient landline rings. Shrill. Analog. I found the phone. It was inside a cracked manager's office. The whole room looked frozen in 1995. Old ads on the walls, shrink-wrapped cassette tapes, a dusty calendar marked July 1997. The phone rang a final time, then clicked. The answering machine picked up. A voice played. My voice. "This is Malik Vega. I'll be back on shift at 10 p.m. Don't wait up, baby." I hadn't recorded that. I'd never seen this phone before. Then the machine beeped again. Another voice. "Malik, it's me. Why did you go back down there? He said it wasn't time yet. You said you'd stop answering. Now he knows your name." Click. I ran. I told my supervisor the next day. He laughed. Said maybe I was just tired. Suggested I take breaks. But then I checked the security feed from the freight corridor and saw myself walking into Sublevel 3. Except I hadn't. The feed showed a timestamp from 2:03 a.m., the same time I'd been on the opposite end of the mall, near the food court, dealing with a homeless guy breaking in. The camera zoomed. The me on the feed paused in the hallway, turned to the lens, and smiled, like it knew I was watching. From that night on, my patrols felt different. No matter where I was in the mall, I felt like someone else was walking just out of sight, pacing, circling, mirroring. Then came the voices. The handheld radio would crackle to life with static, then speak in my voice. Loading dock clear. Continuing sweep. Problem was, I hadn't said anything. Once, during a 3 a.m. round, the radio blurted out, "He's not on the top floor anymore. He's beneath. Let him in." I turned it off. Turned itself back on. There's an old janitor's room near the carousel. Everyone called it the Echo Box because of its weird acoustics. I avoided it, until one night I found the door wide open and the light inside already on. On the back wall was a full-length mirror, fogged at the edges. But when I stepped inside, my reflection didn't follow me correctly. It was delayed. When I tilted my head, it lagged. When I blinked, it stared. Then, it reached up and touched the side of its face, not in sync with mine, and whispered, "He only needed your voice, but now he has your skin." The lights cut out. When they came back on, the mirror was cracked from the inside. I went back. I know, I shouldn't have, but there was something pulling me, like unfinished gravity. I took the elevator to B3 again. The hallway was different, longer.
No lights.
As I walked, I saw something new. Photographs taped to the wall. Dozens of them. All grainy stills from the security feeds. All of me, but not just patrol shots. Shots of me sleeping in my apartment. Me in my car. Me brushing my teeth. One had a timestamp from the next day. Then I saw a final picture pinned to the far wall. Me, slumped in the freight elevator. Dead. Eyes open. I ran. But the hallway wouldn't end. It stretched. Warped. Doors I passed repeated. The office I'd found earlier was now beside me again. Light on, phone ringing. I screamed into the dark. "What do you want?" A voice from the radio answered. "I want your rounds. I want your route. I want your name." Something stepped into the hallway. My height, my gait, my uniform, but with no face, just a stretched copy of my badge where its mouth should be. It walked toward me, fast. I slammed the elevator button, over and over. The doors opened. I blacked out. I woke up on the security bench at 6 a.m. My supervisor said he never saw me leave the mall. But the elevator log showed I never accessed B3. The camera feeds? Gone. Deleted. Erased with timestamps marked "Unknown error." That was my last night. I never went back. But sometimes when I pass a mall, any mall, I'll look up at the second-story windows and see myself standing there, watching, smiling. They say you should never whistle in a graveyard. I didn't. I just answered someone else who did. My name is Adrian Wells. For most of my 30s, I worked as an overnight groundskeeper and caretaker at Cemetery Number 49 in rural Kansas. Small town, middle of nowhere, flatland as far as the eye can see. It wasn't a fancy cemetery, just rows of simple headstones, a handful of mausoleums, and a weather-worn chapel no one used anymore. I liked it. Quiet work. The dead don't complain. My job was to oversee night burials, particularly for religious sects that insisted on moonrise interments. Not common, but it happened. And on the night of October 18th, I handled a burial I was never supposed to witness. The call came in late. A private request from a wealthy family, name undisclosed, asking for a 1 a.m. burial in Plot 8F. They'd handle the ceremony themselves, no priest necessary. They just needed me to prep the site and keep the lights on. Unusual but legal. I prepped the site by 12:30 a.m.
Gravedad.
Floodlights on. Cool night, windless. At 12:55, 2 black cars rolled up. 4 people stepped out, all dressed in heavy coats and wide-brimmed hats. They didn't speak to me, just nodded and motioned for space. They brought no casket, just a wrapped figure on a stretcher. Thin. Too thin. I turned away. But as they began the burial, I noticed they weren't lowering the body. They were pulling it down, like it resisted. By 1:15 a.m., they'd finished. Dirt was filled. They laid a plain black stone. No name, no date, just a single symbol. A circle with a cross through it. Then they left. No words. I went to turn off the floodlight and heard it, a whistle. High, drawn out, coming from the grave. Not a wind whistle. Not an owl. Person. I stared. The dirt moved slightly, like something was shifting beneath it. Then the whistle came again. Longer, more deliberate. I radioed the sheriff. Told him I suspected foul play. He said he'd send someone out in the morning. I didn't sleep that day. Next night, I returned for my shift and walked the grounds to check the grave. Plot 8F was gone. I don't mean vandalized. I mean vanished. The ground was unbroken. No stone.
No marker.
No trace of digging. I went to the records room and pulled the log. No entry for October 18th. No grave request.
No burial permit.
But my initials were on the page. Next to a note I didn't write. He sleeps shallow. Do not answer if he whistles. I tried to forget it. Convinced myself I'd imagined it all. Then came October 25th. Exactly 7 nights later.
1:03 nachts.
I was in the tool shed when the air turned cold. Not breezy, just suddenly still and freezing. Then I heard it again. The whistle. But now it was closer. I stepped outside. The lights across the cemetery flickered. At the far edge of the grounds, just beyond the oak trees, I saw a man, or what looked like one, standing still, whistling. I raised my flashlight. His face was wrong. Too long. Jaw hanging at an angle, eyes blacked out like polished stone. He stopped whistling, then raised his hand. My hand. He waved with my exact birthmark. A star-shaped mole near the thumb. I ran. Locked myself in the old chapel. Dialed the sheriff again. No answer. Tried to message my brother. Phone wouldn't unlock. Said, face not recognized. In the chapel, I lit a lantern. That's when I noticed the mirror above the altar. And saw myself. Standing behind me. But when I turned, nothing there. I looked back at the mirror. He was smiling. I did my own research. Found old county records. Cemetery number 49 used to be built atop a religious burial mound, dating back to the 1700s. The settlers who buried their dead there believed in shallow earth interment, laying the body close to the surface to allow its soul to exit easier. But if a soul didn't empty properly, the body would reanimate with a new will. They called them the hollow-born, entities that mimic the living, but never quite right. They whistle to call out to their donors, to see who responds. October 31st. My last shift. I heard the whistle every hour. Closer. Sharper. Now coming from inside the walls of the caretaker's office. I turned on every light. Brought in my shotgun. Sat with my back to the corner. At 3:12 a.m., the office door opened on its own, and I saw myself. No expression. Eyes reflecting the lantern light. He didn't speak, just held out a shovel. In his other hand, piece of paper. I unfolded it. You buried me. You're next. I quit that night. The cemetery was sold months later to a private firm. The new owners bulldozed Plot 8F, planted a flower bed. But each year on October 18th, someone leaves a single item on the grass. A shovel. And sometimes, just after 1:00 a.m., I hear a whistle. Some books whisper when no one's around. Others wait for someone to listen. I wish I'd never listened. My name is Lena Rhodes. I was a graduate assistant at Greystone University, working part-time overnight shifts in the west wing of the main library, known as the Athenaeum. It's a monolithic building, over 120 years old, with 5 floors of archives, private reading rooms, and miles of steel-caged shelving. On paper, the West Wing was closed after 10 p.m., but grad students who needed quiet space were allowed to sign in for late access, as long as someone staffed the reference desk. That someone was me. I loved the quiet, until I found the book that wasn't supposed to be there. It started simple. I was shelving returns around 2:15 a.m. when I noticed a leather-bound volume on the floor near the restricted reference shelves.
No barcode.
No university stamp, but it felt heavy, like it was weighted down inside. The cover had no title, just an embossed circle containing 7 dots. The pages were brittle, handwritten in some archaic script. Latin? Greek? Something older. The bookmark inside was a single black feather. As I turned the pages, a faint humming started, like feedback except inside my head. Then one line suddenly became legible. The unread must not be housed, but they always find a shelf. I closed it. The lights above me flickered. That same night, I heard the west stairwell open. An old, heavy fire door that creaked so loud it echoed through the stacks. No one had signed in. I radioed campus security. No answer. As I moved toward the source, I saw a shadow crossing the hall between stacks. Slow, deliberate, dragging one foot. When I reached the corridor, it was empty, but the motion sensor lights above flicked on one by one, heading deeper into the archives. I followed, and found a man standing in the microfilm alcove, back turned, wearing an old-fashioned library aide uniform, buttoned wool vest, pinstriped pants, and a graystone name tag that simply read, M. Hale, Archivist. I called out. He turned just slightly. His face was blank, smooth, featureless. He raised his arm and pointed at the book in my hand, then whispered, "Don't shelve it, or it will shelve you," and vanished. The next day, I brought the book to the university archivist. She scanned it, frowned, and said it didn't exist in any catalog, Greystones or National. She warned me not to keep it in circulation, suggested I log it under ephemera and return it to the locked vault. But when I tried to do that, the vault scanner read, "Item already logged." I double-checked. The catalog now showed it had been in the system since 1902. Location, West Wing, Aisle X9. There is no Aisle X9. Over the next few nights, things got worse. I'd shelve a book, turn around, and it would be back on my cart. I heard pages turning in empty aisles. One night, I turned a corner and saw a group of books open on their own, fluttering like birds trying to fly. They stopped when I stepped closer, snapping shut with audible clicks, and the humming grew louder. It was clearest near the desk, when I was alone, like a choir whispering from inside the shelves. Following a map etched in the back of the mystery book, I discovered a sealed door behind a false wall in the West Archives. It opened to a hidden chamber, circular, stone-lined, lit by old gas lamps that somehow still burned. In the center was a table, and on it the same book, identical, except this time it was open to a new page. A librarian's task is not to read, but to guard. I heard footsteps behind me, turned. Hale was there. He no longer had a face, just a book sewn shut where his mouth should be. He opened it with a tearing sound and said, "You've catalogued yourself." I ran back to the main desk. Everything seemed normal until I checked the overnight log. At 2:41 a.m., a single book had been checked out. Call number, unknown. Title, unknown. Borrower, Lena Rhodes. Date due, never. I looked at the book in my arms. It now bore a label on the inside cover. Property of Lena Rhodes. Night Keeper. Bound eternal. I quit that week, but not before I tried to burn the book. It wouldn't catch. Water didn't soak it. The pages were always dry. One night, I left it locked in a vault overnight. Came back to find every other book inside turned to ash. Only the black book remained. And now it follows me. No matter where I go, it's on my shelf. And each night at 2:41 a.m., it opens itself and turns to the next page. I've cleaned schools, offices, even abandoned asylums. But Building B? I never cleaned it. I just tried not to let it know I was there. My name's Joseph Joe Miranda. For 20 years, I've worked night janitorial shifts across the Midwest, subcontracted through a facility company that cleans everything from strip malls to county buildings. In 2023, I got assigned to a medical campus undergoing renovations outside Cincinnati. 3 main structures: Admin A, Medical C, and an old diagnostics lab called Building B. The lead supervisor said no one had used Building B since 2011, but they wanted it swept and cleared for inspection. The thing was, none of the other janitors would touch it. Everyone traded shifts to avoid it, so they gave it to me. Building B was brutal. Dust everywhere, flickering lights, and power inconsistencies. The HVAC system still hummed, but the air always felt too cold, like someone had left a freezer door open for years. As I walked the 3rd floor, I passed old exam rooms and testing labs with peeling paint and rusted counters. The elevators didn't work. The intercom system randomly buzzed. Then I heard a tone. One long beep like a call button being pressed, followed by a voice, low and muffled. Test in progress. Please observe silence. No one else was in the building. On the 4th night, I found a room that wasn't on the blueprint. Room 3B12. A sealed research chamber with a 2-way mirror. Inside, the light was on. There was a chair in the center of the room, bolted to the floor, and thick leather straps hanging from the arms. A metal table beside it held broken wires and a headset, some kind of neurological monitoring gear. Then I saw a clipboard near the wall. The last entry. Subject: 31. Awake during trial. Eyes did not close. Protocol incomplete. Remove observer at once.
Signature: Il Gible Scroll.
Date: June 12, 2011.
Time: 2:41 a.m. That night, I heard footsteps pacing the hallway above me. Building B only has 3 floors. Back in the break room, I found an old VHS player. Inside was a tape labeled, Trial 31. Final. Curiosity got the better of me. Played it. The screen showed the room I'd just been in. But this was back when it was operational, clean, bright, clinical. A woman sat strapped in the chair, muttering numbers to herself. Someone off-screen asked, "Do you see it now?" She answered, "It's behind the glass." Suddenly, the lights cut out. When they returned, she was gone from the chair. Then the camera panned toward the mirror and showed her standing behind it, staring into the lens. Then she whispered, "Who's watching now?" The tape ended. I tried ejecting it. Wouldn't come out. I turned around. The break room mirror was fogged, and a handprint appeared from the inside. A few days later, I was cleaning the old reception desk when I found a logbook. Inside were incident reports, all dated after Building B had officially shut down. Each one described a janitor who had heard whispering or seen figures in mirrors. The last page had my name, written in ink that hadn't dried yet. Under it, stays longer than 3 weeks. Shows signs of awareness. May begin to see the hallway again. I hadn't been there 3 weeks yet. Week 3, I tried to leave early. Walked down the main hall to the stairwell. But when I opened the door, I was back in room 3B12. I tried again. Different stairwell. Same result. Every door I opened led me back to that room. Finally, I walked down the hallway, straight, no turns, for 15 minutes. Still ended at room 3B12. That's when I noticed the mirror wasn't just reflective anymore. It was transparent. And something was sitting in the chair now. It looked like me. That night I blacked out. I don't remember sitting in the chair, but I woke up strapped into it, facing the mirror. Except this time it wasn't a two-way mirror. It was a window, and behind it stood a row of people, all watching me silently. They all looked like me. Same face, same posture, same eyes. One raised his hand and wrote on the glass with his finger, "You've been observed." Then the headset activated. Static in my ears. And a whisper, "Trial 32 begins." Quit. But Building B wasn't done with me. I see it now in dreams, reflections, polished chrome. Sometimes I'm cleaning a store or gym and catch a glimpse in the glass. I'm sitting in the chair again, strapped in, being watched. They always told us not to pick up passengers between stop 39 and 40. I broke that rule once. Now I don't know if I ever dropped her off. My name is Jorge Medina. For 6 years, I worked graveyard shifts driving the 6A line for Hollow Pines Transit, a regional bus route that weaved through a quiet stretch of Appalachian foothills and abandoned mining towns. It was one of the last night loops in the area. We'd get maybe 4 passengers all night, mostly folks heading home from late shifts or trying to sleep their way to nowhere. Our rulebook was simple. Stick to the route, no deviations, and never stop between stop 39, Old Quarry Road, and stop 40, Braxton Hill Cutoff. Under any circumstances. Dispatch said it was for safety. No lighting, unpaved shoulders, too many accidents. But that wasn't the real reason. It was 2:12 a.m. on a Tuesday in September. I was 5 hours into my loop, rolling through that dark stretch between 39 and 40 when I saw her. A woman standing on the side of the road, waving both arms like her life depended on it. She looked early 20s, pale skin, short dark bob haircut, wearing a plain white hoodie. I slowed down instinctively. Something felt wrong. The moment the headlights hit her, she froze, hands still raised, eyes too wide. I remembered the rule, but it was cold. She looked scared, alone. So I stopped. She got on without saying a word, and never tapped her card. I watched her in the mirror as I drove. She sat in the back, 4th row from the end, staring out the window. Never moved, never blinked. "Everything okay?" I asked over the intercom. No response. I glanced again. She was gone. I hit the brakes, turned on the cabin lights. She was now sitting in the front row, hands folded neatly, facing forward. My heart started pounding. I forced a smile. "Where are you headed?" Her lips parted slightly. "Just between stops." I called dispatch. Dead static. Tried again. This time I got an automated voice. "Transit no longer monitored. Passenger error." What did that mean? I looked back. She was gone again, except her reflection remained in the overhead mirror, sitting quietly, staring straight at me. Just past the bend before stop 40, the bus started slowing on its own. Brakes hissed, cabin lights dimmed, and then we came to a full stop in the middle of the woods. I didn't touch the brakes. The door opened automatically, and a second woman stepped on, identical to the first. Same hoodie, same bob cut, same empty expression. She walked down the aisle and sat directly across from her twin. The first one turned to her and whispered, "One more to go." Then they both looked at me. Next thing I remember, I was back at the depot. Sun rising. My manager asked why I skipped stop 40 and turned off my GPS tracker. I checked the time card. Said I'd clocked out at 2:17 a.m. But I clearly remembered it being after 3. When I looked at the onboard surveillance footage, the loop glitched. At 2:13, the video flickered, showing both women in every seat of the bus simultaneously. Overlaid. Flickering. Watching. Then static. Since that night, I keep seeing her. Sometimes just one, sometimes 2. Once, I saw 12, seated evenly throughout the cabin, all with blank faces, hands folded in unison. I tried switching routes, transferring districts. Didn't matter. The 6A loop still shows up on my tracker, even when I'm not assigned. And every so often, the bus slows without me touching the pedal. Right between stop 39 and 40, and the door opens on its own. Last week, I stayed on the bus past my shift, let it drive itself. It stopped in the woods again. Only this time, no one got on. Instead, a voice came over the intercom. "Time to get off, Jorge. Your stop's coming up." The voice was mine. I looked in the mirror. She was driving, and I was sitting in the back. They say water remembers everything. That's why I stopped drinking what came out of the pipes at Blackridge. My name is Ethan Weller, and I spent 5 years working night shifts at Blackridge Water Treatment Facility, located just outside Muncie, Indiana. It's an old processing plant, built in the 60s, fed by an underground reservoir and connected to a buried aqueduct system that dates back to early settler days. The plant ran mostly automated cycles. My job was to monitor gauges, check chemical balances, and ensure no blockages or system faults occurred. One overnight operator per shift. Always alone. The others hated Blackridge. Called it the lung. I didn't understand that nickname until the breathing started. It was late October, cold and damp. Around 3:10 a.m., the chemical pressure alarm tripped, a blaring strobe and klaxon that indicated something was off in Tank 3, the sediment filtration vault. I checked the diagnostics.
No anomaly.
No flow irregularity. Pressure, temperature, even pH normal. But the alert refused to clear. So I threw on my coat, grabbed the portable tablet, and descended the maintenance stairwell into the lower reservoir levels. The air got thicker with every step, like it had weight, and when I opened the subhatch to Tank 3, I heard it for the first time. A deep, slow inhalation, not mechanical, not natural, like the building was breathing. I chalked it up to echo or a vent anomaly. But that night, as I returned upstairs, the hallway lights flickered, and the cameras on the monitor system froze. One camera, the interior of the access tunnel to the south overflow chamber, stayed active. I stared. There was a man in the frame, standing ankle-deep in water, head bowed, facing the wall. He wore coveralls.
No bag.
Then he lifted his head. No face, just dripping, pulsing skin, like waterlogged cloth over muscle. He turned to the camera. Then the screen went black. I found an old facility manual buried in a cabinet. It contained documents from the plant's original engineers. One page had a hand-drawn diagram labeled Reservoir D'. Notes underneath said, Block chamber sealed 1972. Access revoked. Multiple unexplained vapor patterns. Vocal reverberations present. Reported anomalous sound. Breathing. Then a handwritten line below. The water has learned our shape. In the following days, I started seeing reflections in the surface of the water, shapes that didn't match mine. In the restroom mirror, my eyes looked too wide, like they were adjusting to something deeper. I stopped drinking from the fountains. The bottled water tasted familiar, like my own mouth. I tried calling out, telling myself it was fatigue. But the next night, the emergency vent valves engaged themselves, pumping untreated water back into the secondary chamber. That shouldn't have been possible, unless something triggered it manually, from inside the sealed vault. A few shifts later, I was looking through old storage when I found a rusted locker labeled C. Marsh. I didn't recognize the name. HR had no record. Inside the locker was a folded note and a cassette tape recorder. The note read, "If you're hearing it breathe, it already knows your blood type." The tape clicked when I pressed play. A man's voice said, "I opened it. I shouldn't have. There's something in the tank that isn't sediment." this waiting for the right cell pattern. Something it can hold. Something it can wear. Then a second voice, gargled, wet, a copy of the first, whispered, almost ready, just one more swallow. That night, I heard the breathing again, louder, more rhythmic. I checked the logs. Flood protocol had been engaged for Reservoir D', a sector I'd never even accessed. That part of the facility didn't exist in my map. Yet the system insisted it had opened. Water pressure in the outer tanks began rising on its own. The only way to shut it down was manually, at the old junction box under the catwalk. So I went. As I crossed the catwalk, the walls pulsed with moisture. Not leaking, sweating. The water below churned without any current. Then I saw it. A figure rising from the tank. Made entirely of water, shaped like a man, but too tall, too stretched, like it had never worn a body before. It opened a mouth it didn't have and inhaled. I felt my lungs seize, like it was trying to take my breath. I smashed the override lever. The tank slammed shut. The lights exploded. I blacked out. They found me hours later, drenched, unconscious. No one believed what I saw. Quit. Burned the manual. Got as far away as I could from reservoirs, filtration plants, even drinking fountains. But sometimes, when I shower, I swear the water stays on me longer than it should. And last week, I found a puddle in my basement, with a single footprint in it. My size. You'd be amazed how many calls you get between midnight and 4 a.m. You'd be terrified if you ever answered one that came from inside your own booth. My name is Ray Costa, and I worked as the overnight DJ at station WZUR 96.3 FM, a small independent radio station in upstate New York. We broadcast to a triangle of sleepy towns and truckers passing through. Midnight to 5 a.m. was my territory. Talk segments, old blues and classic rock, call-in dedications, and reruns of paranormal conspiracy shows for the graveyard crowd. I was alone in the building most nights. The booth had one big window facing the studio hallway, a microphone arm older than me, and walls padded with cigarette-stained foam panels. It was peaceful, until I got the looped call. It was 2:44 a.m. I was halfway through a Janis Joplin set when the red caller line lit up. I answered cheerfully, "You're live on WZUR. Got a dedication?" No voice, just static. Then a faint voice, my own, saying, "You're live on WZUR. Got a dedication." I hung up, but the phone rang again. Same number, unknown. This time, the voice whispered, "Don't stop talking." Then silence. Then the sound of my last broadcast, playing back, phrase for phrase. Except I'd only said half of it. That week, it got worse. During songs, I'd look up and see someone standing in the hallway outside the studio, just barely visible in the booth's window reflection. When I turned around, no one was there, but the door was always unlocked. I never left it that way. Once, I saw a flash of movement in the window during a live segment. I rewound the security cam. The footage showed me inside the booth, but behind me, another version of me stood at the door watching. On November 3rd, I came in to find my Thursday night broadcast wiped.
No archive. No backups.
Dead air from 2 to 3 a.m. I asked the station engineer, Greg, if there was a glitch. He looked pale. He said, "Ray, you called me that night. From the booth." I didn't. He nodded. "You said you were stuck. That you couldn't get off the air. That your voice had been taken." I laughed it off, until he showed me his call log. My number.
2:12 Uhr nachts.
Duration, 43 minutes. A week later, a manila envelope arrived at the station. No return address. Inside was a cassette tape labeled, WZUR broadcast. Do not play. Played it. Static for 5 minutes. Then the sound of the station's bumper. Then my voice. But I wasn't speaking. I was crying, sobbing between song tracks, whispering names I didn't recognize. And then I heard it. If he stops broadcasting, he'll have to hear us. At the end of the tape, a low growl. Talk or be taken. I started noticing weird shifts in the studio. The walls warped. The foam panels breathed. The mic picked up voices when nothing was on. I played a record one night, just white noise, to buy myself a break. Came back to find a transcript of a full show in the printer. I never said those words. The transcript included a segment called Dead Guests with DJ Ray, Voices from Beyond. I don't host that show, but when I Googled it, I found a pirate radio forum listing from 1996. Station WZUR, 96.3 FM. Listed host, Ray Costa. I was born in 97. One night, the studio door slammed shut on its own. Locked from the outside. The light above the on-air sign turned red and stayed there. I couldn't leave. The mic went live. The speakers played my intro. And then a voice, not mine, not human, hissed, "Keep going. Until your voice is ours." Quit. But Greg says someone still uses the booth. Every night at 2:44 a.m. No DJ present. No records spinning. Just a mic picking up a voice. One that sounds almost but not quite like mine. And it always starts the show the same way. "You're live on WZUR. Got a dedication?" They say death is just the beginning. But what if it's a beginning you're still awake for? My name is Dr. Elena Barlow. Before I quit the field, I was a cryopreservation technician at Etherian Labs, one of the more secretive cryonics research facilities in the country. We operated just outside Reno, Nevada, buried beneath a hillside under what looked like a tech startup from the outside. Our job? Maintain the bodies of the legally dead, frozen within minutes of clinical death, stored in liquid nitrogen chambers at -320 degrees Fahrenheit, in the hope that someday medicine would bring them back. I worked overnight shifts. Just me and 138 patients. What I learned is that some of them don't want to come back. Some of them never left. One night, around 2:36 a.m., a low vibration rumbled through the storage wing. I thought it was an earthquake, but nothing moved except Pod 77. The chamber's frost monitor blipped erratically. I walked over, thinking it was a mechanical glitch. Then I saw it. The body inside. A middle-aged man, face serene, arms folded, was twitching. Not thawing. Twitching. His fingers moved. First one, then two. Then the whole hand tapped against the chamber's viewing panel. 5 times. Like a knock. I checked the readouts. Temperature. Stable. Brain activity. Flatline. All systems nominal. Except he was looking at me. Eyes wide open. Pod 77's name was Benjamin Harlan. Tech billionaire. Died of a brain aneurysm in 2022. Frozen 22 minutes later. I checked his file. Something stood out. The original medical report claimed he was pronounced dead at 12:42 a.m. But the scan timestamp from the Neurosync freeze?
12:47 nachts.
5 minutes of unaccounted time. In the notes section, a line was blacked out. Redacted. I ran a recovery program. The line reappeared. Subject's cortical activity restarted prior to full preservation. Witnessed by Night Tech S. Jennings. No record filed. I looked up Jennings in the employee database. There was no Jennings. 2 nights later, my environmental readouts started spiking. Temperature in Zone C rose 60 to 89, was climbing 3 degrees per hour. That shouldn't have been possible. The nitrogen feeds were operating fine, but frost levels were dropping fast, like something was breathing from the inside. Then the intercom clicked on. An old voice, rasping, "Let me out. He's still in here." It wasn't Benjamin's voice. It was mine. I accessed the internal CCTV archive. At 3:01 a.m., the camera near Pod 77 glitched, then showed movement. A shape, vague, humanoid, stood beside the pod watching it, tall, shimmering as if half there. When I enhanced the footage, I saw the shape raise a hand and tap on the glass. Once, the same 5-tap pattern Benjamin used. Then it walked out of frame. The timestamp, 3:06 a.m. At 3:07, the motion sensor at the end of the corridor picked up a figure moving toward the server room. There is no door that connects them, unless you walk through walls. I dug deeper into the legacy logs, the ones from the lab's prototype phase in the early 2000s. Found a restricted document labeled Neural Linger Hypothesis Phase. It outlined research into residual consciousness trapped between brain death and synaptic preservation. It theorized that under extremely rare conditions, the self doesn't fully extinguish. Instead, it fragments, remains. One line chilled me, conscious but paralyzed, screaming internally, eternal freeze state. Another note, handwritten. Some begin to influence their surroundings. Communicate. I don't think they're human anymore. On my final night, all chamber locks disengaged for 4 seconds before rebooting. Only one actually opened. Pod 77. The lid raised with a hiss. The body was gone. In its place, a note, printed from the internal log printer I didn't know existed. It read, "Thank you for listening." Then a second sheet emerged. Next patient, Elena Barlow. Preservation authorized. I escaped that night. Went dark. Changed names. Switched cities. But I still don't drink anything cold. Because every time I put ice in a glass, it clinks 5 times. Tap, 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 tap. And sometimes when I sleep, I hear my own voice, whispering from the dark, "Let me out." They said no one was housed in Block E. That's funny, because someone kept screaming to be let out. My name is Terrence Gale. I used to work 3rd shift as a surveillance monitor operator at Hillside Correctional Facility in Pennsylvania, a medium security prison with a long, weird history that no one really talks about. I was stationed in the North Tower, a tiny, concrete-walled room stacked with 27 black and white monitors. Each showed a different cell block or corridor. Nothing ever really happened. Most nights were just static, flickering screens, and the soft hum of ancient electrical wiring. But there was always one screen I wasn't allowed to touch. Cam E12. It showed Block E. There was no Block E, at least not on any floor plans. The other officers said it was a leftover wiring loop from the original construction in the 50s. No active cells, no access from the main yard. Just a dead wing, sealed up after a fire 30 years ago. But the camera worked. It showed a narrow corridor, dimly lit, 6 doors on each side, steel-plated, no windows, like solitary confinement units. And sometimes, those doors moved. I first noticed it at 2:11 a.m. on a Thursday. A door on the left side slowly opened, then slammed shut. No wind, no humans down there. But the motion sensor registered inmate activity. I radioed the floor sergeant. He said, "Terrence, don't joke around." I wasn't. I watched it happen again 3 nights later. This time, 2 doors opened simultaneously. Then the feed glitched. When it came back, the hallway was darker, and someone was standing at the end, facing the camera. Still, head tilted. The lights flickered, and the figure disappeared. Next day, I checked the system diagnostics. Cam E12 was rerouted power from a source labeled Legacy Generator, D-Level Sub. The sublevels had been condemned. Officially, I dug into archived maintenance logs, found references to Containment Overflow 1973, D-Level/E-Wing merger. Then I found an old staff memo with this line, Block E operational protocols suspended until vocalization ceases. Vocalization. That night, I muted the feeds, but Cam E12's audio overrode it. I heard breathing, then pounding, then a voice. It didn't speak like a prisoner. It chanted, one for the cell, one for the floor, one for the eye behind the door. The next shift, I tried unplugging the monitor. It stayed on. The footage showed writing on the walls now, scrawled in something dark. We see you two. I asked Warden Jeffers if there was a basement corridor no one was using. He got real quiet, said, don't go looking for things that don't want to be found, Gail. A week later, a floor officer named Ruiz went missing during rounds. Security footage lost him near the laundry chute in C-Wing. But Cam E12 showed something else. It showed him entering Block E. Except there's no way in. Unless he found it from below. That night, Cam E12 went black. Then rebooted to a new hallway. One I didn't recognize. The doors were gone. Just endless walls with claw marks. The timestamp read 3:33 a.m. Then a figure appeared.
Ruiz.
But not him. His uniform was soaked. His eyes were black. His mouth opened wider than it should have. And he whispered, there's room now. You can come down. The hallway behind him stretched, then bent. I swear the image tried to reach out of the screen. I pulled the plug, walked out. I handed in my badge that morning. But the next day I got a package. No return address. Inside, a single VHS tape labeled Block E Terrence Gale Shift. I don't own a VHS player. I threw it away. Next morning, it was back on my kitchen table. Same label. New date. Yesterday's. And in my hallway mirror, I now see a cell behind me, with my name on the door. They told me the West Wing was decommissioned. If that's true, why was someone always signing in from inside it? My name is Isaac Rowe. I was hired in late 2022 as a private security contractor for a biotech research facility outside Flagstaff, Arizona. NDAs up the nose. Vague descriptions of the work, neural mapping, genetic latency studies, post-human potential, whatever that meant. My job was clear. Work the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift, monitor camera feeds, and do a patrol of the lower levels once per night, and stay out of the West Wing. That was emphasized repeatedly. West Wing's sealed. Off-grid. No need to check it. It wasn't just empty. They told me it had been gutted, no power, no labs, no personnel access. Still, it showed up on my monitor panel as active. West 1 through West 5. The first week was uneventful. Long, quiet hours. The occasional delivery. Anomalous readings here and there, but nothing major. Until I saw the login. It was 2:26 a.m. System pinged me, employee badge access. Entry granted. West Wing, Level 3. Employee ID, IR 3042. That was my badge number. But I hadn't left my desk. I checked the playback feed. A man my height, my uniform, stepped through the West Wing gate, scanned a badge, and disappeared into the corridor. The cameras followed him down a dark hallway lined with deactivated lights. Then static. The last frame? Him turning to face the camera. Smiling. I radioed command. They said, "You're not authorized to view West Wing activity. Cease access attempts." I replied, "But someone used my ID." Their answer was immediate. "You're the only IR 3042 on payroll." 2 nights later, the feed auto-switched to West 2. The hallway was lit this time, but not by fluorescence, by flickering CRT monitors mounted to the walls, each playing grainy black and white footage of faces. Not people. Faces, pressed to the glass, twitching, mouths moving in time with some unheard chant. One monitor showed my face watching the feed, eyes wide, bleeding from the ears. I yanked the cable. Feed cut. The next night, my door badge denied me entry into the control room. I called ops. They said, "You've already clocked in." I said, "I haven't." They said, "Then who's watching your shift from inside?" That same night, I ran a manual override and accessed the West Wing floor plan. What I found didn't make sense. Each lab in the West Wing was labeled IR 1001 to IR 1099. There, my initials. And next to IR 1042, the room name, Identity Resequencing Live Trial. The occupant, active. I opened the door. Inside was a single operating chair. Straps. A head halo. No blood, no mess. Just the faint scent of ozone. And a monitor screen blinking. Replication complete. Next host ready. The lights went out. My radio clicked on. A voice said, "Congratulations. You've been selected for iteration." Then a second voice. My voice said, "Get out. I'm not the original anymore." I ran. As I exited the hallway, alarms tripped throughout the facility, but only in the East Wing where I had never been. As I turned the final corner, I passed a full-length mirror bolted to the wall. I saw myself, but my reflection kept walking, out of sync. Since then, I've been getting strange messages. Emails from unknown senders, subject lines blank, just attachments labeled with numbers. Every attachment is a video. Every video is a different version of me, living a different life, dying in different ways, all stamped IR 3042, failure. I don't know if I'm the original anymore, but sometimes when I speak it doesn't sound like me. Sometimes I dream of the chair in IR 1042, and someone whispers from behind my teeth, "Iteration confirmed. Begin again." Every night I polished the glass cases, even the ones with no exhibits. But then something inside started breathing on the glass. My name is Danielle Frey. In 2021, after losing my hotel job during the pandemic, I took a night gig as a cleaner at the Northside Historical and Natural Science Museum in a sleepy New Hampshire town. Paid all right. I was responsible for the basement levels, mostly storage wings, retired exhibits, archival records. All stuff too dusty or fragile for public display. I had a key card, a checklist, and a rule: never enter Vault 9. The head custodian told me that on day 1. Vault 9's sealed for climate control. Don't even badge it. Just mop around the door and move on. I didn't ask questions. I'd cleaned worse places, places that really did stink of death and bleach. This place? Mostly old bones and taxidermy. But after 3 weeks on the job, things started shifting. First was the glass. We had about 24 freestanding display cases in storage B. Floor to ceiling, sealed airtight, most of them empty or draped in sheets. One night, I found a handprint on the inside of case 14. I wiped it off. Next night, 2 handprints. One on the inside, one on the outside. By week 4, there were full smears on the glass, like someone had tried to claw their way out. Still, I followed the checklist, did my work, ignored the weird. Then I found the note, taped to the inside of a mop closet door. It wasn't old, looked freshly written. Sharpie, block letters, stop unlocking it. They remember being seen. I hadn't unlocked anything, until the next night when I found my keycard listed as recently used for Vault 9. Badge record time, 2:44 a.m. But I was on the other side of the building at 2:44 a.m., caught on the motion sensor by the fossils wing. I checked the security logs. Vault 9 had been opened, then relocked. No one was on the footage. So, I did the thing I promised myself I wouldn't do. I opened Vault 9. Inside, it looked like any other sealed exhibit chamber. Dark, cold, smelled like salt and old wood. In the center stood a single display, a glass coffin, empty. On the far wall a placard read, "The breather, origin unknown. Donated 1891. Removed from public display in 1957 due to unexplained condensation events. Sealed for preservation." That's all it said. But there was something else.
Fog.
On the inside of the coffin glass. Fresh. I closed the vault. I told myself I imagined it. The next night, I found muddy footprints leading from Vault 9 to the taxidermy room. The cases in that room had been rearranged, and one of the deer heads, previously mounted, was now missing its eyes. Instead, small white stones had been stuffed into the sockets, and a note placed under its tongue. "Look away before it exhales." From then on, Vault 9 unlocked itself every night. My badge still showed as the access source. Even when I left it locked in my locker upstairs, I reported it. Got a warning for tampering with restricted areas. They thought I was messing around. Then I caught it on camera. Security footage from 3:03 a.m. Vault 9 opens on its own. A tall figure steps out, no face, just smooth skin where features should be. Wearing old-style museum staff clothes. In its hands, a rag and a bottle of glass cleaner. It began polishing the other cases, one by one. Then it turned toward the camera. The lens fogged and cracked. The last frame was a close-up of its skin, pale, wrinkled like waterlogged leather. I quit that night. On my way out, I passed the lobby display. The case I had cleaned 3 days prior. My reflection looked back at me, but didn't match. It blinked when I didn't, and behind the reflection, I saw Vault 9's plaque now read, "The breather still on rotation." They said Wing D was unoccupied. That's strange, because I kept finding notes in the logbook signed by patients who weren't alive anymore. My name is Emery Price. For nearly a year, I worked nights as an admin assistant at a psychiatric transfer facility tucked behind an old state hospital in southern Illinois. The facility wasn't for treatment. It was a holding center where patients were moved temporarily between long-term psychiatric units and court appearances. The building was functional but bare. White halls, locked glass doors, buzz-in stations. Most rooms stayed empty overnight, save for 1 or 2 patients under observation. I handled the intake logs, room rosters, and security cameras. Basically, I babysat the system. We had 4 wings, A through D. My training covered 3. When I asked about Wing D, my supervisor, a grizzled ex-guard named Lot, shrugged and said, "Not in use. Too much mold. HVAC's shot. Stay out." The door to Wing D was badge-locked like the others, but no one ever used it. The cameras pointed at the hallway showed the same image, night after night. Flickering lights, peeling linoleum, and 6 locked rooms. Still, every night at 2:30 a.m., the system pinged. Room D4, door opened. There was never footage of it happening. Just a before frame with the door closed, and an after frame with the door slightly ajar. I logged it as a system bug for weeks, until the logbook entries started changing. One night, I glanced through the patient sign-in binder. Each patient had to initial their meds and check-in logs. A line had been added to the end of the page. D4, Ethan Wren, 2:32 a.m. Still here. I checked our digital records. Ethan Wren was a patient who died in 1994. He had hung himself in transfer holding while awaiting movement to a federal facility. I asked Lot. He paled and said, "Forget that name." Next night, I removed the page from the logbook, burned it in the break room sink. At 2:32 a.m., the printer kicked on by itself, spat out the same entry. D4, Ethan Wren, 2:32 a.m. Still here. The security feed for Wing D cut to black for 5 seconds. When it returned, I was looking at a still image of myself, asleep at the desk. Except I hadn't fallen asleep. I checked the timestamp, 2:33 a.m. Then the lights flickered in the hallway behind me. I turned. A man stood at the end of the corridor, pale, thin, wearing hospital whites, eyes glassy and sunken. He didn't move. I blinked, and he was gone. I ran to the camera room and manually recorded all footage from Wing D. When I played it back, it was overwritten with text. Patient has not left. Patient will never leave. I made the mistake of opening Wing D. My badge still worked. The hallway was colder than the others, stale but charged with static in the air. Room D1 was empty. So was D2, D3. When I reached D4, the door was already ajar. Inside, a cot, restraints on the wall, and a single handwritten note on the pillow. Thank you for checking in. You may return to your seat now. I backed out, locked the door, walked back to the main desk. But something was wrong with the monitors. The camera facing my hallway now showed 2 chairs. One was empty, the other held me, or something that looked like me, sitting, smiling. Then it looked at the camera and waved. I quit the next morning, but they never deactivated my login. Now, every night at 2:32 a.m., I get an email from the facilities system. Subject line, D4 patient update. Inside, a timestamp, a photo of my desk, and the reflection of someone standing behind me.